We have always looked to the stars to find alien life, but we forgot to look beneath our own feet. In 2026, a deep crust mining operation in the Antarctic Shield broke through a layer of rock that shouldn't exist. Geologists call it the zero layer, a thin band of refined plastics, synthetic isotopes, and processed gold dating back 55 million years. This is the Silurian discovery. It proves that humanity is not the first technological civilization to claim Earth. Long before the dinosaurs and other species built cities, mastered the atom, and perhaps touched the stars, but they are gone. Not a bone, not a building, and not a single book remains. The Earth has a way of recycling itself, grinding cities into dust and turning steel into rust until nothing is left but a chemical ghost in the soil. The Shorai Council was formed to investigate the zero layer, but what they found wasn't just ancient trash. They found a time capsule, a diamond glass data drive buried in a lead-lined vault at the bottom of the world. When the drive was interfaced with modern AI, the first image that flickered to life wasn't a message of peace. It was a countdown. The Silurians didn't die out because of an asteroid or a volcano. They died because of the Great Filter, a universal law that destroys any civilization the moment it achieves a certain level of energy consumption. And as the Council translated the ancient data, they realized with horror that the Silurians hadn't just predicted our arrival. They had left us a warning. The filter is not an event, it is a predator. And by reaching our current level of technology, we have just signaled that it's time for the predator to return.
As the data from the diamond glass drive flooded the Shorai Council servers, the world above began to fracture.
The Silurians didn't just leave a warning, they left a map of the predator's arrival. They called it the Entropy Shadow, a non-physical entity that feeds on the concentrated energy of a planetary civilization. The first sign that the filter had noticed humanity wasn't a sky filled with ships. It was a global grid failure. Across every continent, nuclear reactors began to behave erratically. The cooling systems weren't breaking. The physics inside the cores was changing. It was as if something was reaching through the fabric of reality and drinking the heat of the atoms. In the heart of the Antarctic mining site, the zero layer began to pulse with a low rhythmic vibration. This wasn't a geological movement, it was a beacon. The Council's AI translated the final line of the Silurian drive. The harvest begins when the sparks become a fire. To the Entropy Shadow, our global power grid, our internet, our cities, our satellites, looks like a blazing fire in a dark forest. And the fire has grown too large to ignore. Panic erupted as the shadow effect moved from our machines to our biology. People living near major power plants began to report lost time. They would stand in their kitchens watching the lights flicker, only to wake up hours later with no memory of where they had been. Their nervous systems, the most complex electrical networks on the planet, were being tapped. The Shorai Council realized that the Great Filter wasn't a single event in history. It is a recurring cycle. Every 50 million years, a species rises, builds a fire, and is consumed. The Silurians were just the last ones to go. Beneath the ice, the ancient machines they left behind, designed to hide their energy from the shadow, started to hum. They were trying to tell us how to go dark before it was too late. But in a world of 8 billion people, how do you turn off the light without plunging the world into chaos? As the sun set over the Antarctic, the sky didn't turn dark. It turned a shimmering, oily black, a color that didn't reflect light but swallowed it. The Entropy Shadow had reached the upper atmosphere. The Great Filter wasn't a theory anymore. It was a shadow falling over the face of the Earth. The Shorai Council issued the order that would change the course of human history. Project Ghost. To survive the Entropy Shadow, we had to become invisible. The Silurian data was clear. The predator doesn't see matter, it sees information flux and energy density. To the shadow, a lit-up Tokyo or a buzzing server farm is a beacon of high-calorie energy. The Great Dimming began at midnight. It wasn't just a blackout. It was a total severance of our connection to the modern world. In a coordinated global effort, the world's major power grids were deactivated. The internet, the collective brain of humanity, was unplugged. Satellites were commanded to enter dark mode, their transmitters silenced, leaving them as dead metal drifting in the void. The world plunged into a silence that hadn't been felt for centuries. But the shadow didn't leave, it descended. As the lights of the cities went out, the oily black clouds in the atmosphere began to sift through the streets. Since it could no longer feed on our machines, the Entropy Shadow began to hunt for the only energy source left, the human bioelectric field. This was the Great Sifting. The Shorai Council watched from their shielded bunkers as the shadow moved through the suburbs of Europe and the high-rises of Asia. It didn't break windows, it flowed through walls like a cold, hungry fog. When it touched a human being, it didn't kill them in the traditional sense. It drained the electrical potential of their neurons. People were left in a state of permanent stasis, their bodies alive but their minds erased, their memories and consciousness consumed as high-fidelity data by the predator. In the Antarctic, Dr. Eris Thorne made a chilling discovery in the Silurian archives. The Silurians hadn't just failed to hide, they had actually built the filter themselves. Millions of years ago, they had reached a level of intelligence so high that they realized the universe was dying of entropy. They created the shadow as a conservation protocol, a cosmic janitor designed to wipe out any species that consumed too much energy, preserving the universe's remaining heat for a few more billion years. We weren't being hunted by a monster. We were being recycled by a machine built by the very people whose ruins we were standing in. The Silurians weren't our ancestors, they were our executioners. And as the shadow reached the doors of the Antarctic vault, the Council realized that going dark wasn't enough. The janitor doesn't just turn off the lights, it cleans the room. Inside the Antarctic zero layer, the temperature didn't just drop. The very air felt thin, as if the shadow was drinking the kinetic energy of the atoms themselves. Dr. Eris Thorne and the remaining Shorai engineers realized that the Great Dimming had failed. You cannot hide from a janitor that already has the keys to your house. The Entropy Shadow was no longer just a cloud in the sky. It had manifested inside the vault as static phantoms, flickering, semi-transparent shapes that mirrored the movements of the Silurian ghosts stored in the data drives. The Predator was using the stolen memories of the past to navigate the present. Dr. Thorne discovered a final hidden directory in the diamond glass drive, the Entropy Bridge. It was a backdoor the Silurians had built into their own executioner. They had realized, too late, that their conservation protocol was too efficient. It didn't just save the universe, it erased the meaning of it. The bridge was designed to upload a chaos variable into the shadow, a piece of data so complex and unpredictable that the janitor would be forced to pause its cleaning cycle to analyze it. But there was a catch that froze the Council's blood. The Entropy Shadow feeds on energy, and a chaos variable is the highest form of information energy in existence. To upload the code, they couldn't use a computer. The shadow would simply eat the server before the transfer was complete. The variable had to be hosted in a living human mind. Dr. Thorne volunteered. He would interface his own consciousness directly with the Silurian bridge, turning his brain into a logical bomb. As the static phantoms closed in, Thorne was strapped into the Silurian neural chair. The connection didn't feel like a machine. It felt like a flood of 55 million years of history, grief and alien math pouring into his skull. Outside the vault, the world was in its final hours. The oily black clouds had descended to the ground, turning the great cities of Earth into silent graveyards of the sifted. Billions of people sat motionless, their bioelectricity being slowly siphoned away into the sky. The shadow was preparing for the final sweep, the moment it would ignite the atmosphere to scrub the planet clean for the next cycle of life. Thorne screamed as the upload hit 90%. His mind was no longer his own. He was seeing the birth of the stars and the death of the Silurians simultaneously. He saw the janitor's true face, not a monster but a cold mathematical equation that saw humanity as nothing more than a decimal point out of place. With a final agonizing surge of will, Thorne triggered the bridge. He didn't send a virus, he sent a question. A question about the purpose of a universe that is perfectly preserved, but completely empty. The shadow stopped. Every static phantom in the room froze. Across the planet, the black clouds ceased their sifting. For the first time in 50 million years, the great filter was thinking. The universe didn't explode, it didn't even ripple. Instead, the world was consumed by a static peace. As Dr. Thorne's consciousness merged with the Entropy Shadow, the janitor found itself trapped in a recursive loop. The question Thorne had asked, what is the value of a preserved but empty universe, acted like a virus in the shadow's conservation logic. It couldn't delete us without deleting the only thing that gave the universe's remaining energy a purpose, the observers. Across the globe, the oily black clouds began to retreat, pulling back into the upper atmosphere, but they didn't disappear. They formed a permanent entropy ring around the Earth, a shimmering dark halo that serves as a constant reminder of the filter's presence. The sifted, the billions whose minds had been partially drained, woke up. They were physically unharmed, but they were changed. They now carried a fragment of the Shadow's collective memory. They were no longer just individuals, they were the library of the Silurians. But the survival of humanity came with a price that redefined our existence. To keep the Shadow in its thinking state, the Shorai Council had to enforce the low-energy protocol. We are allowed to live, but we are no longer allowed to grow. Any city that consumes too much power, any technology that pushes the information flux beyond a certain threshold, triggers a localized sweep of the Janitor. We have become a stagnant civilization. We live in the ruins of our high-tech past, using scavenged tools and analog systems to keep the fire small. We are like children playing in the shadow of a sleeping giant, careful not to make too much noise. Dr. Thorne is gone, or rather he is the ghost in the ring, his consciousness forever acting as the filter for the filter. The Silurian discovery wasn't a tragedy and it wasn't a triumph. It was an education. We learned that the Great Filter isn't something you beat, it's something you negotiate with. We have traded our dreams of the stars for the reality of survival. As the sun sets through the shimmering indigo of the entropy ring, we look at the ruins of our world and understand the true cost of forever. This is Shorai Vision. We are the first species to look into the eyes of the Janitor and blink. We are still here, but the age of the great fire is over. The age of the quiet light has begun. Subscribe and stay with us as we learn to live in a universe that is finally, terrifyingly at peace. Our journey into the silence has only just started.